G'day everyone, welcome to Craig's Aviation YouTube channel. My name's Craig Ingalls. In this video, I'll be talking about how I ended up becoming a pilot in Papua New Guinea back in 1996. I was unemployed and I was staying with two pilot friends in Cairns. And one of these friends was good enough to introduce me to another pilot who had recently spent a couple of years flying in PNG. Anyway, we caught up and this pilot was good enough to share his experiences and a lot of his knowledge with regards to the aviation landscape in PNG at the time. He also shared with me the names of the companies and the names of the chief pilots together with their phone numbers. The next day, I went to a telephone box and started ringing up chief pilots in PNG. I didn't have the opportunity to ring them all because the information I got was very positive right from the onset. Anyway, one chief pilot I spoke to, he said, our minimum requirements are 1,500 hours, which I had. You've got to be single, and I was single at the time, and you need to be able to be prepared to come up here and have a look at our operation to see whether or not you like it and to see whether or not you like the country in general, and also for us to have a look at you. And I said to him, if I can meet all those requirements, what's the chances of me getting a job? And he said 50-50. So I immediately decided that I was going to go to PNG and meet this chief pilot and have a look for myself. So in the next few days after that, I went and purchased a tourist package deal through Air Niugini to go up and have a look the following week. And so the plan was to travel from Cairns to Port Moresby on the Monday morning, then travel over to Madang, which is on the northern, it's a town on the northern coastline of the main continent of Papua New Guinea, beautiful town, and then fly back to Port Moresby on the Friday, and then back to Cairns that evening. Anyway, flew up to Port Moresby on the Monday morning. First impressions when I walked out of the old international terminal at Jackson's Airport, Port Moresby, was I could actually work and live in this country. The reason why I say that, it was completely different to what I'd expected. The people were absolutely sensational, very welcoming, and the environment was just completely different to Australia. Really laid back and very welcoming, and that was my first impressions after about 5 minutes of walking out of the terminal. And there's a lot of people waiting there for their friends and colleagues and everything. And anyway, from there I then went and visited an aviation operator, and I actually met the chief pilot, and he said to me, he said, look, Craig, we can't give you a job with your experience. We do require turbine experience. And I told him what I was going to do, and he gave me a few tips and that, and he knew the people I was going to meet on this journey. He also mentioned that they were also operating an Embraer Bandarandi on a paper run throughout PNG Monday to Friday early in the mornings, and it went through Madang. And if I needed a lift on it, just let him know and he'd be able to put me on it, which I found was a very kind gesture. Anyway, that afternoon I went to Madang and checked into the hotel. The following day I went back out to the airport, and at the time there were three general aviation operators at Madang Airport. I went to two of them and couldn't get a job. However, the discussions were very fruitful and also gave me some insights further into the industry in PNG. And then the last operator I went to was a company called Airlink. Now, I got there at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the chief pilot wasn't there, and they said, if you want to wait, he'll be back at about 4:30, otherwise come back tomorrow. So anyway, I elected to wait around the airport for a few hours in the sweltering heat, and this Bandarandi showed up at about 4:30, pulls up, and all the passengers get out, and the pilot gets out. And I went over and introduced myself to him, and he said, yep, no worries, just give me about 10 or 15 minutes and I'll pack the aeroplane up, finish the paperwork, and we'll have a talk in my office. So anyway, Goes into the office, have a talk to him, gave him my CV and everything. He asked me a bit about my experience, and he looked at me and said, "I'll give you a job." I immediately nearly fell off my chair. He then went on to tell me how much I was going to get paid and what I'd need to do in terms of getting a work permit and getting through the immigration formalities to actually start with the company. Which ended up taking about 3 months. Anyway, I went back to the hotel and then called up the chief pilot I met in Port Moresby and said, "Mate, I'd like to take you up on that lift in the Bandarani tomorrow morning if I could." And he said, "Yeah, no worries. I'll let the pilot know. Just be at the airport at about 6:30, and he'll take you to he'll bring you back to Moresby via Hagen." So anyway, gets out at the airport. This Bandarani pulls up, and pilot gets out and said, "Yep, I know about you. No worries. Jump on." And anyway, he had a mixture of newspapers and vegetables on board. And anyway, we went to Hagen and then down to Port Moresby, and he actually was good enough to actually let me have a pole of the aeroplane as well, which to me at the time was the biggest aeroplane I'd ever flown, let alone a turbine. And funnily enough, a few years later, I actually went on and flew with that pilot and flew the same aeroplane as well. When I arrived back in Port Moresby that morning, I decided to travel back to Cairns that evening. The work permit took about 3 months to obtain, and I started with Airlink in February 1997, and I was based at Hoskins in West New Britain, flying Brit Norman Islanders. Later on that year, I was transferred to Tokwa Airport in East New Britain, and I was endorsed on Cessna 404s, and then a year or two later I was then upgraded onto the Twin Otter. I spent about 2 years with Airlink, then over a period of about 8 years up until late 2006, I worked for quite a few general aviation operators in PNG. Most of the flying that I'd done during that period was in Twin Otters and also Embraer Bandaranis. Initially starting out in single pilot operations, then there was a shift by industry and also the regulator and our clients and customers to move to multi-crew or two-pilot operations. That did greatly improve aviation safety. When I started in PNG, I started in the New Guinea Islands, which is really good entry level into the country, because the operating conditions out there were reasonably benign in comparison to operating in the highlands of PNG. The airstrips are operating around in the New Guinea Islands, mostly coastal. There's a bit of terrain on the main interior of the island of New Britain, also Bougainville, which we did sometimes have to fly over to go from north to south and so on. However, there were no strips in the interior of where we operated into. However, the New Guinea Highlands are quite significantly different. There are airstrips scattered right throughout the New Guinea Highlands, which consists of the main continent of Papua New Guinea. Basically runs from east to west. It's like basically a spine line. The highest mountain in PNG is Mount Wilhelm, and that's over 14,000 feet. The highest airstrip in PNG is a strip called Kegasugal, and that's actually on the eastern side of Mount Wilhelm. That's about 9,000 feet. I haven't actually been into there myself, but I have recently heard aircraft going into there. The temperatures in PNG on any given normal day at any time of the year, the country normally experiences ISA plus 20 conditions, so it's very hot and high, very close to the equator and in the tropics. So the weather systems that go through there can be extreme, and a lot of convective build-up, thunderstorm activity, particularly around the high terrain. When I moved from the New Guinea Islands, I was then based in Port Moresby for a few years on and off. I was also based in Mendi and Tuberbil. Mendi's in the middle of the highlands, and Tuberbil's right out in the Western Province, right up near the West Papuan border. Both those airstrips themselves are quite challenging to get into, particularly Tuberbil. Tuberbil airstrip's at the end of a dead-end valley that extends about 9 miles, and the airstrip's right at the end of it. And it requires visual manoeuvring down the valley in some very challenging weather conditions at certain times of the year. Okay, I'll wrap it up now. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching this. I'm also going to produce some old videos that I made about over 20 years ago, and I'll also pop them up onto the channel. Most of it's in Twin Otters. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, and if you like this content, certainly hit the like button and also make any comments. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. Bye for now.